Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversation with Calvin, We the Species. I always love to hear that little thing, recording in progress. What a special, unique interview that's coming up with Dr. Orna Tsultem on something. I have to, before I even say anything, I have to thank Nanda Disu from Coriolis Company, literary public relations authors. She's been such a great friend in turning me on to some amazing people, including Dr. Orna Tsultem, who's going to talk about Mongolian art, which is something, when I'm watching baseball, I'm not thinking about Mongolian art, but it is so fascinating, and there's so many aspects to it, and things that we wouldn't have never considered. I would have never considered, and I like to think I'm well versed. So, and my reading and studying and trying to learn, and now culminating with spending this precious time, and I'm so grateful that you're here. So this is really special because Mongolian art has been around a long, long time, and we'll talk about why it's not here, rather here, and you are literally one of the foremost curators in the world. So and I really I'm just thrilled that you're here and you're going to expand my horizon and all our listeners' horizons, which I think is very it's very important. In fact, it was an old movie, something with Lost Horizons or something. I think it might have been filmed maybe near Mongolia. Anyway, so this is great, and I'm so appreciative. And how about just doing a little bit of an intro? By the way, you're a professor at Indiana University, which is part of the Big Ten. I'm a Rutgers guy, and so we're kind of related that way. We're in the same academic athletic conference. So, how about a little bit of a background, and then we are going to kind of jump into. We got a lot of things to talk about. Take it away. This is great.
Okay. Well, hi, Calvin. I'm so thankful for coming to your show and be part of this conversation today. It's such a great opportunity to connect with you and your viewers and listeners. Thank you again. So I'm connecting you from Indiana University, where I'm based. I'm originally from Mongolia, and I was born and raised in Mongolia until I came to this country as a student. And then I got married and I stayed in this country and now I'm teaching. I am a Edgar and Dorothy Canal Chair in International Studies and Associate Professor at Huron School of Art and Design.
Okay. Um, right off the bat, right off the bat, Mongolia has a rich history. I mean, a wonderful, rich history. Yet, Mongolian art, even in my small microcosmic world, Mongolian art has been kind of marginalized. When you're discussing Asian art, even global art, why is that?
Mhm. So this is a very critical question, and thank you for this important question, Calvin. Indeed, my mission as a scholar of Mongolian art and scholar of art history, I am all my academic life, I've been struggling to really to bring the voices of Mongolian artists and Mongolian art to this country and to Europe because our museums have the field of art history has been very Eurocentric. Remember, the field of art history was developed in Western Europe, in Italy, and so it remained very Eurocentric. And the way it is changing to be inclusive, it always been a very slow process. And museums are institutions which are very important for education of the general public, but the collections, they just don't have much of collection of Mongolian art, or they've been very close to the idea of having a Mongolian exhibition. So, as you mentioned, I have a curatorial practice, which I very often I teach and curate about Mongolian art because I truly believe in it. I think they're great, and I think that we just need to open our institutions and our students and our public audiences towards knowing these marginalized cultures, you know?
Mm-hmm. What what sparked your passion for Mongolian art?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So so I was born in a family of artists. My own father is a very celebrated, prominent artist of Mongolia, whose centenary actually we're celebrating this year, 2024. And he was very active in Mongolian art scene and developing art institutions in Mongolia at the time when it was very difficult. It was very censorship in the past century during the time of socialism. And I'm currently having an exhibition in Venice, Italy, in conjunction with Venice Biennale. And in that show, I'm actually also connecting personally to my own history of why I'm even care about these artists and art. My family was very instrumental. My father, my brothers and sisters, they're all in Mongolia. They are very critical and they're very important builders of Mongolian art scene. But at the same time, I witness constantly how Mongolian art continues to be very little known. And as I was growing up in a family of artists, I witnessed, the process of art making. And it was very inspirational to see how my father didn't have a studio and he would paint at home in his own room. And I would constantly help him with bringing the brushes or bringing the, paints and helping him with finding different stuff around the newspapers and all that for his art, and constantly watch him to sketch his drawings around people's portraits or about landscape and all that. So it's definitely that type of being around my father, around art, definitely was a spark to follow the route of art history. But also, it is once you grow up, you understand how little Mongolian art is known, and that certainly constantly bothers me. And because I see and I believe that Mongolian art is so unique and it's worth seeing, I think I studied in many countries and I decided to become a professor because I want to teach young generations about Mongolian art.
okay. Uh, Briefly, we could spend hours or take a course with you on the history of Mongolian art. From the little I've plunged into it, I know that early history, I guess before the 20th century, a lot of that art was religious based.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're right. So before 20th century, before socialism became the Mongolian government became socialist, People's Republic of Mongolia in 1924, it was Buddhist country. So Buddhism was the main culture. And the modern day capital city of Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar, which translates as Red Hero, it was built after 1924. It was actually built on the ruins of Buddhist monastery. So Buddhism was completely destroyed and replaced with socialist art.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was and masses of people, monks, were killed during the process. But before also, so the Mongolian art really has a very long history, and you mentioned that it is a rich civilization. It is an ancient civilization, and the Mongolian people are um, nomadic communities. They're pastoral nomads. Even today, we have a large percentage of country who live in yurts and outside in countryside.
Mhm.
And they have cattle herding and they have mountains, and they have seasonal migration from winter pastures to summer pastures. So the culture is shaped, art is shaped around this nomadic habitat and a
Mhm.
nomadic living mode. Listeners and probably most of people in this country know Mongolia through Genghis Khan
Right.
and Kublai Khan. These are all important historical people, not only for Mongolia, but in world history. They played important roles. Mongolia once in 1300s was the largest empire in the world. And there are many books have been written about how Mongolians were important agents and patrons of building new cities and building art. Um, so since 13th century, of course, the Buddhist art was very important and became the major source for making scroll paintings. As you can see right behind me, there's a scroll painting of Buddhist content. And this type of paintings and sculptures, gilded bronze sculptures with Buddhist meaning were made in huge numbers. But there were also arts that are really developed because of nomadic
Mhm.
environment, and they inspired by Mongolian relationship with nature and worship of mountains and rivers, and they're built in on the steppe, in landscape, in open outdoors settings. So it's a very distinct and unique culture because we have all this different periods of nomadic culture and a Buddhist culture and imperial culture and so on and so forth.
Just to reiterate, I'm listening, because what's unique and peculiar to Mongolian art, the nomadic roots, in listening to you and whatever I'm able to glean, because of the nomadic lifestyle, there's a great connection to nature.
That's right.
A lot
Very
of the art is expressive of nature, which I find very interesting.
Yes, indeed. Some practices of indigenous Native American practices of really cultivating, respecting the mountains and rivers and having some rituals around that, that very sort of echoes with indigenous practices in Mongolia as well. To this day, Mongolians worship mountains, cliffs, rivers, valleys, and they continue to do art in open landscape, which is a very important part.
Uh, and this a little off topic. I'm kind of a climate person, uh, because of because of that magnificent country and the mountains and all the nature. Are they somewhat immune to some of the ravages of climate change? Because and uh, do they grow a lot of their own food and they're self-determinant that way?
Yes, so herders are have very self-sustained economies. There's a households who have their own herding of different 5 types of animals: horses, camels, goats, sheep, and they produce their own food. Um, Lots of types of dairies, and of course meat in Mongolia. I know you have different diet, but
Yeah.
Mongolia has many pastures which are organic, and so food is very organic. Um, but also, Mongolia is not immune. Unfortunately, it's not immune to the climate crisis. It's a part of the world, and there are many issues happening, especially since Mongolia opened to democracy in 1990. So Mongolia became first Asian democratic nation 1992,
Wow.
shortly after Perestroika. And since that, the multi-party government rules Mongolia, but it also opened business opportunities for Western corporations. And so many Western large corporations come into Mongolia, as well as smaller mining corporations are coming to Mongolia. And when Mongolia is known for large deposits of gold, copper, and they unfortunately damaging very much the natural habitat,
Oh,
those pastures. And so the artists whom I'm showing in Venice, they are resisting against that. They're showing in their art how the corporations are sort of going after their wealth instead of repairing the land. And this Mongolians are very much connected to nature traditionally, and they have respect for nature. And that yet during this late capitalism, there is a lot of digging and damaging the planet.
wow. Wow. Is is there a tourism industry in Mongolia? Is it? I mean, is it a location for lots of people to go to? Is it more so now than ever before?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's so much so. I think there were several outlets naming Mongolia as one of the interesting places to go, one of the 10 places, destinations for tourists to go. And after COVID, I think there is increase of tourism and um, seasonally, especially summer months. Late spring, summer, and early fall are those months when Mongolia is still warm.
Uh-huh.
During summer, it's very hot, but during winter, it gets very cold. And it's got very air polluted because of coal burning.
Oh,
Um, some parts of the city have districts with yurts, and those yurts burn coal. And so air is very polluted. But otherwise, during summer months and warmer months, crowds of tourists coming to Mongolia because
great.
there's just so much to see, not only art, but also virgin lands.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mongolia is a very big country territorially, but it's small population. And so there's much of the country is barren. And indeed, beautiful landscape. I think this is one of the things that attract tourists. Different ecosystems like a Gobi Desert, and then steppe, prairies, and then large lakes, which connect to Lake Baikal in
Huh?
Siberia. But they feed from Lake Baikal, but then they're very, very pristine. And they're quite big that there are boats. You use boats to go from one shore to
Mhm.
another. And fishing, bird watching, eagle hunting are all
Wow.
parts of the tourism
Wow.
that Mongolia is famous for.
Oh, interesting, interesting. It, I, it's like I feel my mind expanding because this is, it was so far removed from me, and now I'm learning about this. I'm fascinated, truly fascinated. Uh,
Mm.
Slightly off topic, my son. Before he got married, he had his bachelor party
Mhm.
in Iceland.
Oh, interesting.
Really interesting. I didn't go. It was just, a bunch of his friends and cousins.
Uh,
But you taught at the university in Iceland. What was that experience like?
Yes, I had that fortunate experience of teaching in Iceland in 2018. From 2018 to 2019, I was assistant professor at University of Iceland in art history department, and I taught Asian art, Asian art history. I believe I was the first and only art historian who taught Asian art there. But Iceland is one of those very, very beautiful countries where again the destination for travel should be really on bucket list. I would highly recommend. My experience was fantastic. My family was based there. My husband worked there also in an Icelandic company. My son went to a high school in Iceland,
Uh-huh.
and we just loved it. There, even though there are no historical connection between Iceland because it's very north island and in Mongolia where I grew up, but I found so many interesting similarities. Calvin, because of first of all, the climate is very harsh in both countries, and second is that population is very respectful in true respect of nature. And so in Iceland, just like in Mongolia, people have worship of sky, of mountains, and they have respect of even invisible beings. Spiritualities is part of their daily life and on a very serious level, which was very attractive to me because I grew up within that, that within us, the trees are all living beings and mountains have their own spirits. You cannot just go there, you have to respect them and stuff like that. So we were taught this way. And when I saw that in Iceland, that was mesmerizing. And you talk about the landscape, you talk about people, how friendly they are. My goodness, Iceland was an exceptional experience for me.
Well, you just said something interesting, Orna, about trees, the living. I have a tree right. I keep on forgetting what kind of it's a magnificent tree,
Uh-huh,
and very often I'll go and I'll hold the leaves
uh-huh,
on a branch in my hands and
right,
just let energies flow.
right.
That's part of my spirituality,
Mm,
and do that. But it's a very unusual tree, and it's still green and it hasn't lost leaves yet, and of course it blooms late. But it's a magnificent tree and it's huge,
mm,
and I try to communicate with it.
mhm.
You just said that. That was interesting.
Yeah.
You've taught art in different countries um, and you believe it's very important for students uh, to study abroad and to kind of learn and expand their educational horizons, including art. You know,
Mhm.
you really support that whole notion.
I do. I truly believe in that. And in fact, I believe that now, after during pandemic, we really experience how connected we are all over the world. I tell my students, you think you live in Indianapolis, but you're connected to the world. We want it or not. It's a global supply. It's the political connections and everything. We are interconnected. We are
Yes.
dependent on each other. So understanding the world is a part of what I teach about and I believe in. And I think this is also what I mentioned at the beginning, that watching how the artists who are so unique and I'm passionate about, they are being excluded from museums in this country. Um, it just feels to me that the time now is change that. And I know the word DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, became like an everyday word for us, right? Universities have it, even politics now mention it, right? But it is a serious word, and I want everyone, including myself and including my students, take it seriously because it was triggered by Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter movement was very important because it kind of helped us to see how blinded we were towards the communities and people whom we thought do not belong to us, right? Including Mongolians, and it kind of reminded us how we must respect each other. We must open our hearts towards cultures and towards the communities and help us to connect and bridge ourselves and not divide. And Black Lives Matter was a very important movement for arts and humanities. And that's why I'm saying that study abroad and learning about the world, opening the doors in the museums and institutions to learn about the cultures we never heard of. I believe, so many of your listeners never heard about Mongolian art, but let's change it,
Yeah.
right, Calvin? And I'm telling you how good it is, right? I'm a scholar, and my mission is really help you to understand how worthwhile seeing these artists. And this is the time really to take DI very seriously, because DI is not just a word; it's about our opening our hearts and learning about the people and connectedness of the world through the voices that were not visible and are not heard before.
Right. I I'm so there with you. And before we went on air, I mentioned the diversity of my own little channel that I
Mm-hmm.
interviewed people uh, in a lot of different countries because I want to learn. I want to learn culture. I want to learn. One of my favorite interviews was a month or so ago with a 17-year-old from Nigeria.
Wow.
It's funny when he contacted me, Daniel. He contacted me about being interviewed. I just made the assumption he's like 40, 45 years old. So it took a couple of months till we finally orchestrated the interview. And all of a sudden he appears on Zoom. He's not 45 years old. He's 17 years old. Yet he was so grounded. He
Uh-huh.
was so grounded and had such a handle and so mature and so upbeat. And he was a student and he was a business person. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just and that's what you're saying, and thank goodness for Zoom because I can jump around and I can absorb.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's in Nigeria. I'm here, yet we're on the same,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking for a few minutes and we're on that same uh plateau.
Yes, exactly. And
It's
that's possible. And we should do it more. And we should really let those opportunities take us, right? Take us to the lands, to the cultures, to the people whom we never heard of or we never knew, but not staying isolated, not keep yourself isolated in one box, but really open yourself to such possibilities, right? And education, museums are very important to that. That's one of the reasons I curate, because I want to show these people they were not given opportunities. So I want to change that. And in addition to teaching, I go to places such as Venus, where the most important exhibitions of contemporary art happen every 2 years, Biennale.
Mhm.
And so, in conjunction with the current 60th Biennale, I'm curating now a show which is showing four important artists of Mongolia
Which
and showing
good.
wonderful paintings.
It's a good segue.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your curating and what's going on and how about showing us and so take it away and show me curation.
Sure. So Mongolia began to show art at Venus Biennale officially through Mongolia Pavilion in 2015. So less than 10 years ago, and I was invited as the first curator of the inaugural First Mongolia Pavilion in 2015. And this is my third exhibition. May I share the screen?
Please, please, yes.
So I will share the screen to show some images because art needs to be seen. It's better when it's seen. So this is just a poster of my exhibition. The title is Mongol Durag, the Art of Resistance. And I will tell you just in a little bit why is it resistance? What is it resisting against, right? But it is still going on in Venice until late November this year, and it's in conjunction with Venus Biennale. And I mentioned my father. My father's centenary and is dedicated to his centenary. And one of the artists I'm showing is my own father, and you see one of his paintings here, which he
Wow.
painted in 1991, when after perestroika, the news which we were reading in the newspapers and on TV listening is all about how destructive socialism was. And we didn't know about that. My father grew up and was a professional during socialism, and he believed in the socialist government. And then we learned that there were so many people were purged in Mongolia, and so he used the Buddhist element. Skull is a Buddhist element about people's inherent poison that keep people away from enlightenment. But here it is more than Buddhist element. It is a skull that talks about his pain of understanding the purges and killings of socialist times. Buddhist culture was completely destroyed in Mongolia. So he intentionally used the skull to express his pain and sadness for that. And he included this writing here, which is a vertical script, traditional Mongolian script, which was replaced during socialist time with a Cyrillic alphabet. That type of also change of culture was another learning that we had after perestroika. So I have other three artists, like this one, it's a Dr Tsultem, who actually, here's a little detail to see you better, because he works with ideas of, so if my father was resisting socialist realism, and he was not conforming with the idea of socialist realism as the main style, the new artists, the contemporary artists such as Dr Tsultem and the rest, three artists, altogether I have four artists in this exhibition. So the rest of the artists, they're resisting against environmental change, and they're resisting against political corruption. They're resisting against the commodification of culture. So that's why we have Mickey Mouse here in the very center of his painting, because he often uses Mickey Mouse, but this is not an entertaining Mickey Mouse in front of us. It's more like a little bit scary figure. And Mongolia is landlocked between Russian Federation, People's Republic of China. So commodification of culture and sort of geopolitical powers, how Mongolia is balancing itself. So all this is agenda of his work. A second artist in this young group of contemporary artists, Basenjo, this work is in the collection of Hong Kong Han Art Gallery. And you see this central figure who is a metaphor for this corrupted political powerful leaders who are endorsing mining to the extent that it ruins the land. And so they are becoming so monstrous. So they're becoming like a hybrid monstrous figures. They're multi-armed, and then they have horns here grown up. And so these are those powerful people who embody the corruption, allowing the land to be destroyed for the wealth of corporations. So neoliberalism is the topic. And here are the spirits of mountains and rivers are coming out, making themselves visible. And they're having this big scroll facing to these monsters, political entities. And the script is here in traditional Mongolian script. And it's telling essentially, save our land, save our virgin rivers, help us to reserve all this, don't destroy everything. Whereas here, the political figure, the corrupted political figure, his newspaper it has Cyrillic letters, and it says, Truth Today, which is about the neoliberalism. And here's just a close-up view how this men in suits became all monsters fighting with each other, and they're sitting at the desk, but they all are kind of growing horns and antlers and becoming this hybrid creatures concerned about only themselves.
All right, I have to say something. Can you go back to that 1 second?
Yeah.
My goodness, you could sit and look at, and actually the three things you've shown so far, you can sit and study this for hours. No, I'm serious. I'm looking, and there's so much going on.
Yes,
There's such subtlety, and there's subtlety and there's power.
Yeah.
And the story being told,
Mm-hmm.
this is incredible. I mean, what I've
In,
seen is incredible.
mhm. So you see, Calvin, so it's really, you understand my passion now, right? Because I see this
Yes.
kind of art and I'm thinking why our museums are not showing it.
Oh,
You know,
this
why they are so reluctant to show Mongolian art, the exhibitions, right?
it's
So that,
absolutely wonderful. Wonderful.
mhm.
Wow.
That's why I'm bringing it to, I brought it to Venice and hopefully someday I will bring it to this country and to show it in real life, right? In real person. And this style, as you mentioned, there's so much is going on. This style is called Mongol Zurag or Mongolian painting in translation. And that was a new style invented during socialism. And my research is finding out that my father was a very instrumental in developing and inventing this style, which was meant to be visually very different from socialist realism. Socialist realism was based on European conventions of linear perspective and anatomical, realistic depiction. This one does not follow those conventions. So it meant to be, and it is visually, compositionally, and figures, as you can see, there is a lot of grotesqueness, there is a
Yeah.
lot of exaggeration,
Yeah.
and the composition is filled. There's no empty space. So this is all parts of what defines Mongol Zorak as a new style. And
Wow.
the style still continues today. And my point in this exhibition and my research is that in the past they were resisting socialist realism. Now they're resisting the environmental damage. They're resisting from local tradition. They went to global conversation about the resisting of neoliberalism and corruption. So here's an pandemic in this case, because this is a woman artist, and she has a series of that we're showing in Venice called Our Life, consists of 5 paintings, and as you can see, it's a smartphone plugged in, and if you see the detail of this phone, these are all, this is how we're limiting ourselves, especially during pandemic, limited our explorations based on smartphones, right? So here are this little men and women, they exploring the world through smartphones.
Hmm. Wow.
And here's another one. Here's the entire composition. First of all, it is dark because of she painted this during lockdown, during pandemic. So she felt it was a dark period. And she has 3 children, so she painted her own 3 children here. But they're all the heads are filled with smartphones. That's how she felt there. Now they're so much, overpowered by technology or powered by smartphones, and but they always have to be connected, and these smartphones is like a wings for them to fly to explore the world. So these are the 4 artists I'm showing, um, but just another picture is my own book. Um, I'm a scholar, and my book you just saw is about Mongolian Buddhist art, Buddhism, which was destroyed during socialism. And so I would encourage your viewers and your listeners at some point, please consider learning about or seeing Mongolian art.
Yeah.
It's really worth seeing.
Wow. What I've seen, and when we go off air, I'll ask you some questions about my being able to show that. But it, it's a wow,
Thank you. Thank you
truly,
so much. Yeah.
truly. And even before you showed me this, I'm stereotypically thinking, these are pastoral pictures and the art, and I'm thinking mountains and trees and rivers, but I'm not thinking what you showed me. So for me, this was wow to see that. And
Yeah.
literally, and I'll be able to go and just study those
Mhm.
and just look at the detail, the stories being told. It's great
Mhm.
stuff. Wow. This
Mhm.
is
Thank you. Thank you so much. I truly believe in these artists. I'm repeating myself. I'm just so passionate about them. I dedicated my life to them,
yeah,
to showing Mongolian because it's just so beautiful and so unique. And we just need to stop that institutional exclusion, that attitude, where either it's political powers must play a role, and marginalizing cultures
sure.
continues, right? So we just need to change that.
No, this has been absolutely wonderful.
Mhm.
Just a couple way off topic questions. I like to paint pictures of
Right.
people that I interview. Just real quick, some of your favorite movies.
Let's see. I'm a big fan of movies. That's
Good,
how after the long day of computer work,
good. Me
I
too.
go to my kitchen, I cook. My husband puts a nice movie and we watch together. That's how my day ends. And I have many favorite movies. I would mention two, if I may. One is I use in my classes, also in my teaching. I think this is one of the good movies. You may have heard. It's titled The Mongol, and it was Oscar nominated. It's done by an international crew, so there are Japanese actors and there's a Russian producer, a Russian director, Sergei Bodrov. There are Mongolian actors, there are Chinese actors. It's an international crew. And a very important artist from Central Asia, Namdokov, he actually also designed the set.
Uh-huh.
So um, I use that movie in my classes and I love that, just, artistically speaking. It's just beautiful movie. Um, in my personal life, in terms of my own private values as a person, I love the movie with Al Pacino called The Scent of a Woman. I would see it over and over again because it's just about a young man, his growth, his maturity, and two strangers, right, Al Pacino and this young man, they become close because understanding and sharing the values of being loyal, of being to do what's right. And the last words that the movie finishes with Al Pacino defending that man, saying, "Do the right thing. Don't sell yourself, right? Don't let money buy your dignity." That's just resonates with me so much as a person who shares this value. But also, I have a son who is a young adult, and so I try to, as a mother, teach him. And I just love that movie as well.
So interesting you said that. I literally a half hour before we went on air, I saw an article from a New York newspaper about Al Pacino
Uh-huh,
and his life, his work,
uh-huh,
the money side of Al Pacino. It was a really really interesting article. And he's got three or four. He's had three or four different relationships where he has kids, and so I read that about who's one of my favorite actors.
mhm.
Last question, and this is also you don't have to answer it. I enjoy asking it. So here it goes. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
Wow. Interesting.
It
Yes.
is. It is.
I'm a historian because I love to historical figures and learning about history and all that. So in the last couple of weeks, I'm just learning so much about this French actor called Alain Delon.
Sure.
I remember during socialist time when was also part of my life. Not only we were allowed to see a couple of Alain Delon movies, but his movies were all about also what is right and wrong. And his movies such as Le Samurai, which is about a assassin, but in the end he dies, and how it influenced the important filmmakers in Asia and in this country and in Europe. Those is just it's mind blowing for me. And I'm a very curious person, and because he passed away in August this year, I was just telling, my husband is Italian American, and he played, Alain Delon also played in Italian movies such as Rocco and His Brothers and classics like that. So my husband and I were talking, we should rewatch some of his movies and kind of pay homage to this great actor. So I would say Alain Delon at this
That's
moment.
great. I just wrote it down. I wrote both these things down, and actually, I'm an old, I'm a movie person myself too. That's why I asked that question. I got to look up the Mongol, and I'll find it and I'll watch it.
Yes,
And I'll
yes,
send you a note after I'm done. So
you please do.
we've now concluded this most amazing interview.
Mhm, mhm.
And if my height was this, then it's this now. So
Thank
you've
you.
helped me grow. Of course, I'm inviting you to come back.
Mhm,
We could do panels. I mean, I'm here. I'm here, and this was just so wonderful, Orna, and I can't thank you enough.
mhm,
To be continued. Please come back. So
mhm,
I'm gonna stop recording.
mhm.
Don't leave. I have some great questions I want to ask you off air.
Okay.
But thank you so much. This was really wonderful. And
Thank you again for inviting me and making me part of your show. I really enjoyed it.
I truly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
So I'm stopping recording. Don't leave.